Abel's offering and death. After Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they started a family. Then we read about the first incident that occurred as the history of mankind began to unfold outside the Garden of Eden. This is the story of the elder brother, Cain, who was a farmer, and the younger brother, Abel, who was a shepherd. Later, she gave birth to his brother, Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." God was pleased to accept Abel's offering of a lamb. This offering is reminiscent of the garments of skin that God had made and in which he had clothed Abel's parents. When Cain offered God some of the fruits of the soil, would he not have known what had happened to his parents in the Garden of Eden? As though ignoring the fact that the ground had been cursed because of his father's disobedience, and that God had said man's flesh, destined to die, would return to the ground, Cain offered a sacrifice that was unrelated to God's promise of the offspring of the woman in the garments of skin that God had made. Cain's inner state, which was lacking in faith and consideration of God's righteousness, was revealed through his sacrifice. When Cain was angry and his face was downcast, God warned him that he must rule over sin. But Cain rose up against his younger brother and killed him. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done?" "Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." These events occurred during the early years of the history of mankind, as presented in the Bible. The parents disobeyed God, and then their son ignored God's warning and killed his younger brother. In this world that had been very good in God's eyes, a history of tragedy began to repeat itself to a disconcerting extent. We cannot help but ask why. Why was the shepherd Abel killed? He was clearly the righteous son who offered the sacrifice God would receive. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. The lamb that Abel offered, and Abel himself, who was killed unjustly despite having offered a righteous sacrifice, are prophetic depictions of the offspring of the woman who would someday taste death. Similarly, the Bible alludes constantly to the fate that had to be encountered by a certain person. His heel would be struck. God made garments of skin and clothed them. Abel brought an offering of the firstborn of his flock and its fat portions. Cain attacked and killed Abel, his younger brother. It was decided that at some point within the history of disobedience that began with the eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the serpent and the offspring of the woman would strike one another. If this had been planned within the simple thoughts of man, the obvious and logical conclusion would have been that the offspring of the woman would win an impressive victory. Before this victory was accomplished, however, the Bible and God presented the scenario of what had to happen to this person. We have barely reached the 4th chapter of Genesis, and we are only on page 5 of the Bible. And yet the evidence presented to us is clear. Man's life must be one of hard work and suffering. The Creator God also relinquished his rest and started working again. The preparations were being made for a particular offspring to appear in this world at some point, and he too would have to work hard and suffer. When we consider Abel from our human perspective, we may feel sorry for him and think he was treated unfairly. We may even ask if this is what the Bible means by justice. Yet it is because we, as descendants of Adam, appear so pitiful and unfairly treated from God's perspective that he prepared this course of history. This is a matter that each one of us needs to consider carefully. Having killed his younger brother, Cain fled the land and became a wanderer. Then God gave a new son, a new offspring, to Adam and Eve in place of Abel, who had been killed. The Bible tells us that this son, who was called Seth, inherited the same likeness and image as his father, Adam. Through accounts such as this, the Bible teaches us over and over again the way in which God carries out his work and the order in which he does it. It was ordained that the Messiah, who was to solve all problems, would come precisely according to all the prophetic evidence that God presented through the Scriptures. First, his mission was to come and suffer an unfair death as Abel did. After that, he was to come again in a new form, like Seth.